The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good evening, everybody. Good news. Keir Starmer has just announced he's abandoned plans to implement compulsory digital ID. I think this is hugely good news for all of us. It shows what can be achieved when sensible MPs get together and with public support make their views known. Nearly 50 MPs signed my open letter to Keir Starmer on this subject, to which we were implacably opposed. And I think we can say this is a victory for common sense. It's a victory for all of us. And we can safely say now that we retain our freedom. Another slice of it has not passed to an oppressive nanny state. We've got 3 more years to go, and we must collectively use this as the template to fight the nonsense that's being peddled and promulgated in this country now. So well done, everybody. Have a large drink to celebrate this evening.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's Thursday, the 16th, 2026, and we're here live on Financial Rebellion with Catherine, Carolyn, Renette and Twyla. So big news from the UK. Twyla, I think you'd be the best to comment on this.
Well, it was such good news, and I think it was a surprise because I really felt that Starmer was, dead set making sure that this happened in the UK. But I think, what it shows is the power of truth. So when people get informed, when people get educated, and when they learn what something really is, and then they take to the streets because they see the threat, then what you have is the ability to stop these leaders who think that they are, power themselves. And so what we have seen here is that the UK is now free from the mandate to get a digital ID or lose your employment. However, I just did see something come over the transom yesterday that apparently Ofcam, which is their communications regulator in England, has now started some regulation, some initiative where it gives them the ability, or where they're telling the telecom companies that they should be scanning the text and the emails of all of the citizens of the UK, searching for, things that they don't like, or, crime or immigration or whatever it is. So England is still in trouble when it comes to privacy rights and when it comes to big government. But this was a total win for the people of England.
Yeah, and good for them to get out. They really fought hard out there on the street, so I'm very proud of them.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else want to comment on that, Catherine? Oh, we can't hear you.
Let me get my. I can't get. Oh, you good to go?
We can hear you.
The last time I checked, the petition was at 2.5 million signatures, but headed north. Does anybody know where it was when they canceled? Because the petition was skyrocketing.
I don't know that was not something that I was watching. Right. I know, the petition was there. And I think petitions, at least in America, petitions don't do a whole lot unless they get to a certain level. So maybe they got to that level in England. But I have to say, when you've got pictures of people marching in the streets, that's a powerful media image. And it means people have taken time out of their day, not just to sign something, but to make a statement and to fight, essentially, for their rights.
So what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing it all throughout the Western world, is a new recognition that this stuff is very dangerous and that the leadership really wants to go to total control. So I'm seeing a sudden, movement up the S curve of people understanding how dangerous this stuff is. Is that your experience?
Yeah, I do believe that that is true. Although I do not believe in America that the majority of people understand. I think they understand the trouble with the government controlled digital ID. But given what happened in Minnesota, where they had a digital ID bill, and we went and we talked to the legislators and we said, do you realize that every time you use it, you will ping the government? So the government will have all of this information on you because, of course, it's a government data system that is being put on your phone. And they were all like, deer in headlights. So I think that is a problem. Everybody around the country understands the problem of totalitarianism. They saw it with China. They saw what that was like for China. They now saw what was happening in England, but they don't necessarily connect all the dots. In the United States, I think it's still about convenience. And when you have a bunch of legislators about to move forward on digital ID who don't even realize the government is really involved and will be part of this, we still have a problem with information.
Right. So I've met with people working on state digital ID systems who think their system is going to be private, and then I discovered they're planning on outsourcing it to the big cloud companies, and I explained that those cloud companies are major contractors for the U.S. intelligence agencies and DoD, and they're shocked. They didn't think of that. So
there's just like your whole drive here, with cash. And I was going to bring my, make cash great again hat, right? Because I think it's so great, and I bought it, and I'm going to be wearing it this summer. But the whole idea with cash and the whole idea with paper is these things are not trackable. And those people who want to control us, they're all about digital. So I know cash, things that are tangible in your hands, are not trackable.
Right.
Okay, should we go to the next piece of news?
Yep.
All right, Lou, let's have that up there. It's a Solari report. Catherine Austin Fitz. It's a tweet, I think. Is it, Catherine? Can you talk us through this?
Yes, a very important thing happened. What we're watching, what we've been living in for many decades now, is a world where if a good is scarce, you just raise the price, and that solves the problem. You get more of it. Now, what is happening with trade wars and very serious geopolitical tensions, we're discovering that we outsource the manufacturing or the refining or the access of many different things that we need to run our economy, and sure enough, we can't get them. So now it's called bifurcation. The markets are bifurcating, and you see it with the price of silver being very different in the West than it is in the East, and the shipment and export of silver now being managed back and forth. And so the Secretary of the Treasury met with a group of finance ministers, but also people involved in material, about the need for basically all sorts of precious and base metals, and the fact that everything they want to do with financial transaction control is now at the mercy of these various shortages. So that is, for me, unprecedented, because normally if there's something to do with the material economy, you have the Secretary of Commerce or the Secretary of Interior or DoD or State Department deal with it, not the Secretary of Treasury. But we're watching an integration of concern. And what's really interesting is if you look at the digital control grid, it's putting a huge demand on access to resources that have now been outsourced to countries who are no longer, who are willing to close the door and not export to us. And so you're seeing a real reconfiguration in the economy, and the Secretary of Treasury announcing this meeting is a perfect indication of what's happening. And unfortunately, sometimes when you hit these walls in tension, that's what causes wars and violence. So get ready for a much choppier ride as a result of this bifurcation in the economy.
Okay, excellent. Anyone else want to comment on that before we go to the next piece of news? No? All right, next piece of news, please, Lou. As private equity cashes in on autism epidemic, kids end up big losers, experts say. So who wants to comment on that?
So we just did a huge report, 3 hours, on the private equity industry and an overview of what's happening in the U.S. economy as a result of private equity. I can't recommend it enough, but one of the things we discovered is private equity has done a major job of rolling up the service centers for autism. And it's astonishing. And autism is a great, big, profitable business for them. And it's interesting because if you look at the financial interests on the side of continuing the poisoning that's causing the autism, it's interesting to see the integration of those financial interests with making money on the service centers that support, all the things that parents need when they have autistic children. So we were very glad to see this article in the Defender because we need to bring transparency to who and what is doing this.
Well, and
Yeah.
people in the medical freedom movement need to understand what the plan, the model is for private equity, which is to drive, to cut costs, not pay too much attention to the customers, and what their needs are, raid the pension plans, which might not be involved in autism centers, but sell the property and then enter into big agreements with insiders for rent and things like that, and basically strip the company. And the autism servicers, of course, are contractors to the state generally, Medicaid or whatever. But just understand that if the control is how do we make the most money, you're not going to have individualized treatment, and you're going to have protocols. You're going to have all sorts of things that make it not as attractive a business in terms of serving the client, who are our children.
So, Polly, one of the things you need to know is that I don't believe the pandemic could have happened if private equity hadn't done such a great job of rolling up doctors' offices, hospitals, healthcare services. It gave them much greater control of the policies implemented in the healthcare industry. But one of the things we do in our 3-hour presentation is we go through what you need to do in any healthcare services, including autism services, to understand whether or not the company or person you're dealing with is essentially in an operation controlled or owned by private equity, and why it's so important to find one that isn't.
This has happened in the hospital environment and the nursing home environment, and people have died as a result of, the policies of the private equity. So you can expect kind of the same thing in this area. It's also big in the behavioral health businesses, which may cross over with autism too, but
I think if I could add something to this discussion, just some numbers. So if you look at doctors around the country, 80% of them now are employees. So we're looking at there's nobody like a physician, nobody who has the training of a physician. All the other practitioners are not physicians. As good as they are not physicians. So 80% of those who have the critical skills, the training, the expertise, all of that are not their own independent professional anymore. They're employees, and they are doing the bidding of their employers as much as they may be trying not to do so. Now, with private equity, apparently private equity, in the statistics that I have found, there's about 6,000 physicians that are owned by private equity. But you can also look at and then the hospitals that are owned by private equity as well. There's about 22% of the hospitals. But you can also look at United Health Group, which is kind of in hot water these days because of the finding that it has made people sicker on paper than they are in truth in order to get more of the Obamacare risk adjustment dollars. So they're in hot water. There have been lawsuits, all sorts of things, but they employ about 90,000 physicians, although there is some rumors that they're going to get rid of some of those because maybe it hasn't worked out well for them. But the whole idea here is you aren't having individual independent doctors working for you for the most part, unless you can find them in like our wedge at jointhewedge.com, which are all independent. And then, DPC practices around the country, direct primary care practices. So we need to get back to that. But private equity wants to go the opposite direction. And that kind of corporate control over medical decisions is dangerous for patients.
Yeah, I think the saddest line of this whole conversation is Catherine saying there's big money to be made out of autism. So first of all, they damage our children beyond belief, and then they just make money out of them. And this whole thing is so evil to me. All right, next piece of news, please, Lou. All right, this is the Hill. As Maha wages war on pesticides, the GOP is caught in the middle. So, Catherine, what's up there?
So there's been an ongoing battle, both now at the Supreme Court and state by state and in the federal legislature. Bayer, who bought Monsanto, is trying to get liability shields for pesticides. At the same time, the MAHA group is trying to lower pesticides in our food. And unfortunately, if the legislation that Monsanto, aka Bayer, is pushing happens, things are going to get much worse. So there's real tension, and of course, the Republicans on the Hill are caught in the middle of this. And Carolyn, I don't know, do we have a new update from the lobbyist who represents us on financial freedom is working in several of the states to stop this legislation, has managed to stop it, her group in both Tennessee and North Carolina. And it's amazing what can happen. It looked like there was nothing could stop it, but we had Alexandra Munoz, who came on Financial Rebellion, who's a toxicologist, and was able to explain how dangerous this is, including explaining that the impact on fertility is such, if pesticides have liability and the products that are in planning roll out. She expects that this will be an extinction level event because the impact on fertility will be so bad.
Yeah,
Anyway,
understand. Yeah, it's a federal as well as a state issue. So they're
Right.
doing the same thing at the state level, and at the federal level, Bayer was lobbying to get the liability shield in the Defense Authorization Act, and they prevented that. But now they're working on the farm bill. So, but nothing. I've not heard any movement over the last couple of weeks. So, but it's still worth calling your representatives, and it absolutely is a liability shield, even though they'll talk around it and say, well, not, it doesn't say there's a liability shield. It's just that they impose certain regulations that make it impossible to sue.
Right.
Okay,
Can I just say this as a farmer's daughter? I'm a farmer's daughter. Small farm, right? And it's not like we didn't use some pesticides, but when I just look at what's happening here, and I just think about how Congress has really led this country into corporate farms, large corporate farms, which makes it I guess, easier for the corporations to do this sort of thing to us and harder for the smaller farms to exist. And so, to some extent, I think this is possibly a problem that has been caused by the corporatization of farming.
Right.
And then there's just so many other things that are problematic about the corporatization. But I just want to throw that in. I think it's not just all Monsanto. I think it's Congress, too.
Right. I couldn't agree more, Twyla.
Do we have any more news, Lou? Oh, we do. Tell the House, no wireless expansion until the FCC complies with court order. Who wants to take that one on?
Well, I'll just say that the deadline is today. What happened was we talked in the previous episode, and if you didn't see it, go, it's still online, go listen to it. But there are FCC rules that are proposed that are basically going to take away control from localities over where cell towers go, and you can expect them every 700 feet or so. And there was a comment period, and now there has been a 2-week comment on the comment period, so that you could still get your comments in, and that expires today. And there was a movement to try to extend the period, and the administration or the FCC said no go. And so your deadline is today, and that is a link to where you can go to make your comments. And
Thank you.
so we are encouraging people to do that.
Let's hear from Annette, I think, on this.
Right. So what happened was there's been a huge surge in the last 2 weeks. We were like 3,100 comments. Now we're at 4,500, and a lot of them are coming in from the cities. And as Carolyn had mentioned, they were petitioning essentially the FCC to say, hey, look at this happened during the holidays. And also, there's many times people tried to submit their comments and the docket just wouldn't pop up. This happened for days. Nonetheless, the FCC bureau within the FCC said, no, we're not going to do a 2-week extension, that we need to fast track this. And we're like, everyone was like, well, you couldn't handle 2 weeks? And they're like, nope, can't handle 2 weeks. And we're going to just go right along. And once that word got out, people started to file right away. So today is the deadline. This is a reply to comments. So if you have not made a comment, go in and you'll find, for instance, there are some wireless organizations and wireless companies that have also submitted comments, but by far the vast majority of them are against this deregulation, this delete essentially of local government and local authority. And so and I've done something on my Substack where I really started looking at different reports and strategies from the White House to really get into what is with the big push. And ultimately, what it really boils down to is that the White House believes that if we do not win the AI race against China, that they're going to control us. So what they're doing is they're saying, well, we would prefer Americans they're going to have a digital prison. We prefer to be Silicon Valley rather than China. And so they've kind of created this binary story that it's either China or Silicon Valley. And they have set it up to fast track it so quickly that everything will be installed before the courts even make their decision. So they know from these reports that they will end up in court. They know more than likely they'll lose in court. But what they're going to do is they're going to slow walk these court cases until everything is installed. And by the time the court decides in our favor, it's too late. That is part of their strategy.
Thank you, Annette. Do we have any more news, Lou? Is that it? Might be it. No more news. All right. So let's go to term of the day, shall we?
Yes, the term of the day is not something that you would look up in Investopedia, as our terms for the day often are. This is a term that we at Solari Report have coined, and it's called coming clean. And we have a document that you can download, or you can buy a copy on our website about coming clean to build a wonderful world. And I'm going to read the introduction. We wanted to do a whole episode on this, but we've had so much news that we're just going to try to integrate the idea of coming clean with what's going on in terms of the digital control grid. But Catherine's introduction says the current financial system is centralizing political and economic power in a manner that's draining or destroying living equity, people, plants, animals, and our natural resources, as well as the financial equity of many people worldwide. We liken these forces to a tapeworm, a parasite that grows stronger as we feed it. Like a tapeworm, these forces inject addictive substances into our system that we have allowed to incentivize us to participate in what makes the tapeworm's work strong. So basically, we're feeding the tapeworm. As we do, we are drained until we perish. How do we stop building a parasitic economy? We have come to understand that many instances of fighting or confronting centralized authority or trying to reason with it only add to its power and deplete our enthusiasm and resources. There is a better way, one that shifts the flow of energy back to us. And so what coming clean is, on a very basic level, is coming clean in your individual life so that you are not feeding the tapeworm. And the tapeworm is, the big companies that you have credit cards with, who you select to, who your municipality selects to invest their money with, sending everything to New York rather than keeping it local. All of the things that take over the small businesses, and we can't vote our way out of the way things are going in terms of the building of the control grid. We have to take action in our individual lives. I mean, I, for example, am taking apps off my phone. I'm not doing QR codes. I'm slow walking everything through. I'm doing as much analog as I can, but having and just talking to our friends and explaining what's going on is taking action and giving us energy. And the idea is not to do things that drain your energy. Do things, network, talk to people, appear at municipal hearings, educate yourself, doing all the things that will contribute together with everyone else in stopping the parasitic economy. Catherine, do you want to comment on that? We can't hear you.
Sorry.
There we are.
Mute out. I always tell the story of being in Washington and standing with a congressman. We were standing up in a office building looking down at the protests, and the congressman turned to me and he said, as long as they're carrying Citibank credit cards in their back pocket, what do I care if they walk up and down? So what he was saying is, whether it's your bank, whether it's whose stocks and bonds you buy, if you're financing what they want, if you're financing the digital control grid and going to work and building the digital control grid, they really don't care if you're out in the street protesting. So coming clean is about going through all the different aspects of your life and making sure you're not feeding the beast. You're not financing your enemy. You're not financing the guys who are doing this to you. It first came up when I was sitting in Washington trying to stop the mortgage fraud in 1998. And I was writing a check on one of the New York Fed member banks, their private wealth group. And I said, why am I banking at the bank that's doing this? I need to come clean. And that's when it started. We published our first Come Clean in 2004, and we've been redoing it. So this is a big overhaul and redo. But if you go through Coming Clean, there are 24 or 25 different areas in your life where you can come clean. And the idea is to help you do everything you can to shift your time and energy and resources to building the kind of world you want to live in and you want your children and grandchildren to live in, as opposed to feeding the very beast that is doing all these things to you. So, we spend a lot of time pushing for changes at the legislature, pushing for regulation, but don't forget to go through your financial statements and your balance sheet and do everything you can to do. And what you'll find is the more you get them out of your pocketbook and out of your wallet, the safer and less risk you will expose yourself to. The people who, had their money in Madoff, it often doesn't come out well. So part of this is just good risk management.
Yes, and just bringing it into what we're talking about today, using a state ID rather than a federal ID, and screaming bloody murder to your representatives if you're not allowed to do that is one step of coming clean.
Well, so we called this show Eliminating Impediments to Digital Control. So should we hear from Renette first and then Twyla on their thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think that we have to really take a good lesson from what's happening in the UK. The fact that overnight, without even a hint, the digital ID is dead. And so one of the things we have to realize is that this has happened because their representatives didn't really fully understand the risks. It's not only a risk to individuals for hacking and losing their identity and so on, but it's also a national security risk as well. And you don't want to have your whole entire life on a digital form, because if you get hacked, if there's a power outage, everything comes to a stop. You want to go back to analog. You want to have paper backup. You want all of this. And so one of the biggest things that we can do, which is I think what this whole entire show is about, is educating the masses. And then they go to their state representatives, they go to their county and their city representatives, because I can tell you right now, they have no idea. And the reason why we saw this turnaround in UK was because the representatives got educated. And so there is right now a standardization that the FCC is trying to do across America, which is essentially destroy local government. They literally are saying, in order to save the national level, right, we have to, or national security, we have to destroy local government and the impediments that it presents, like environmental, cultural, historic, things like that, setbacks and so on. We have to destroy all that in order to save the nation. And we, the people need to say, no, 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 we actually have more options than that. And you're putting us into a cage, you're painting us into a corner when it's absolutely not necessary. So I think the best thing we can do is have people continue to come to the show, go to, seeing what you're talking about, Catherine, with coming clean and educating our legislators. Like, look, we have other options, and putting us into this digital cattle chute is the most dangerous thing you can do, not only for Americans, but for our national security. And as you've already mentioned, Catherine, you're talking about an extinction level event. The people who are on the tip of this spear, who are involved in EMRs and EMFs and so on, understand that if the FCC and the White House get their way this year and they begin to slow walk through the court cases while they're rolling out all of the antennas and cell towers, that too is going to be an extinction level event. So what we're saying too is we're arguing, saying, look, on one hand, you're saying we got to do digital ID, we got to get into this cage, everything has to be tracked and surveilled and so on. And yet, ultimately, it's going to be our demise, and there'll be nothing left to govern. And when I do look at all these reports that I was studying this last week, again, to back up what you're saying, Catherine, it's in the studies, not the studies, it's in the reports, that ultimately this would be essentially a depopulation. There's no way around it. And they don't seem to be disturbed by it at all. So it's our job to go again and actually educate right now, this month, educate our leaders at every single level and say, you have to understand what's going on here. This is literally pushing us not only into a digital prison, but ultimately, if they get their way, it will also be an extinction level event. We're talking pollinators, everything.
So I think it's really important that any legislator at the federal or state level understand that once this is complete, we won't have taxation with representation. You don't need legislators anymore. The bankers will run all of the legal and regulatory infrastructure.
Correct. And let me tell you, one of the little kind of bait and switches that the White House has done is they realize that they cannot be the holders of your digital ID, because what they want to do, and this is written into their strategy and the reports, is they want that kill switch. And they know that as a government, they can't have the kill switch because that's a Fourth Amendment violation, right? Illegal search in warrants and so on, or seizure. But if they hand over those keys to Silicon Valley, then they can have the kill switch. So they're literally outsourcing that portion to Silicon Valley because they know it'd be completely illegal and unconstitutional for the government to do it. But they want the kill switch. And again, they're saying that they have to do this. Your name and your identity has to be connected to your digital ID. It can't be anonymous. It can't be encrypted. That is actually not true. But once again, they want that metadata because it's very, very valuable. And that too is also baked into the keys that go to Silicon Valley.
One of the great moments in the UK fight was when the former head of MI6 came out, as you pointed out, and said, this is a national security problem. You are creating a huge database that will be hacked, and this is a national security nightmare. This is dangerous. This is a dreadful idea from a national security standpoint.
I would just say the entire move to digital. I'm in the healthcare space, and so the electronic health record, the HIPAA, which is a complete lie, that was just a way to get everybody's data. The electronic health record system, the state health information exchanges, which are networks to share your data, the national exchange, which is the e-health exchange, which anybody can go and find out, if your practitioners are on there. All of those are really threats to our personal security and to national security. Everything that they digitize puts us in a vulnerable position, not only to corporate hackers, but to foreign actors who do not have our best interests in mind as a nation, not just wanting our money, but, wanting our land, wanting our country, wanting to take our freedom.
Well, in addition, what we have to tell our legislators is they absolutely have to, decentralize our water, our power grids, our communications, especially emergency communications. All of the stuff will be completely hackable. And the thing is that at least right now, as it currently stands, if you get hacked, that information, that data, that bank account, whatever it is siloed. But if they get their way, everything is all together collectively in your phone. So not only is your phone going to be highly valuable, but hacking it, because then you're going to get everything. As I've said before in the past, once you get hacked, it's not like you just go back in and change your password and you're good to go. It's gone. You're a digital refugee. And so all of these points have got to be brought up to our legislators and our community members, because when I do talk to them, and I'm talking to them all the time, they just see it as a convenience. What's the problem? And then when I inform them, they get concerned. They're all of a sudden they realize the risk. So this is why talking right now is, when people are like, what do we do? It's so overwhelming. What do we do? I'm like, just talk to everyone you know, locally and legislatively. Talk to everybody.
So,
So
Twyla,
go ahead. You're going to
so
talk on me anyway.
Twyla, you brought up small farms. And I want to bring up small business because we've seen a war on small business for years. And I want to connect the dots to data. When Bill Binney was he was the top technical director at the NSA. And when the war on terrorism started, he developed a program that could identify terrorism risks without compromising privacy of citizens. And it was rejected. There's a wonderful documentary on this whole issue called The Good American about Bill Binney and about this rejection of his program. And it turned out that, in fact, the NSA wanted to collect up 100% of the data, break through any privacy concerns, and basically store all the data on enormous server farms that would be managed by corporate contractors. And it was clear to me that the goal was, in fact, to share all of this data with private corporations. And at the end of the day, if you look at the roll-up of private equity or large corporations, there's a huge intelligence advantage that comes from having the data, whether you have the data from the transactions at the Federal Reserve or the data, the transactions that the NSA surveillance rolls up. And so we're talking about creating a huge gap or a huge taxpayer-funded competitive advantage by the big guys because of their access to data. And I will just say, I was a federal regulator at an agency which had extraordinary data on housing, real estate, and land in America. And one of the things I have always advised any subscriber or client is whatever data you have that the government has, consider it public. These are just not secure data operations.
Wow.
Well, I would just like to say that I think we should think of the digital ID as the hack, like the ultimate hack. And people don't see it like that. But once you have the digital ID, it's like, it's like everything, right? So it is the hack. It's not just about hacking into the thing. It's like it is the hack into our life. It's the hack into our freedom. It's the hack into everything that maybe the outsiders want to do, whether that's surveillance, whether that's profiling, whether that's tracking, whether that's profiteering, whatever it is the ultimate hack.
So for the people at the back that are not hearing this, describe for everyday life. You get up in the morning, what can you do to stop this, Renette, Twyla? How can you do? I know you said go and speak to people, but what else can they do? You said no QR codes, none of that kind of stuff. It all leads into it.
Right. Well, I mean, ultimately, you still have today to file. I recommend doing that. That does assist us. But, really, people also can start really getting used to maybe leaving their phone home so they're not being tracked all the time. This is something that we're so connected to it that just mentally and emotionally not having it always in your hand is something that's really important because they are tracking your every move. And the best thing you can do is monkey wrench that system and leave that darn thing at home. And I have to tell you, you'll probably have a better quality of life if you do that. And that's a real simple thing to do. But but that is a slippery slope. It's a convenience. Oh, I need it. I have to be in constant communication. And that's what they are relying on, that we have it everywhere. And if you make it very inconvenient, so when you go to a store, if you go to a restaurant and here's a QR code, or do your little Apple Pay, like, sorry, it's just me with my cash. And you kind of monkey wrench that system. And also what happens, and I've seen this before with the masks, but when I would go to a grocery store and I didn't have a mask on and I saw people behind me falling in line and I'm going on through, I would watch people like kind of go like this and literally like take their mask down, like they're kind of embarrassed, like, oh my gosh. And if they see people who are using cash, who aren't using their phone, who are actually having a conversation in line while you're talking to the checker and the people around you, that's how you have that ripple effect. And that's where we are right now. And to let you know how fast this is moving, by the end of February, there's going to be a floor vote on a whole slew of these bills that reflect what the FCC is trying to do, which is deregulate everything, deregulate and destroy local government. And so it's not that difficult to go out there, but really just being a model and not having your phone everywhere you go and using that cash, that ripples out. I've seen it ripple out. So it's small things, but if there's a lot of people doing it, it'll have a big impact.
So, Renette, where can we find a list of the companies that are pushing this legislation and these rules?
Well, the list of the companies, it's all the telecoms. I mean, it's the telecoms, it's Silicon Valley. They're the ones who are really behind all of this. And of course, the White House. I'm sure there's a lot of money to be made as well. But these are the ones who've been pushing it. But I have to say, when you look at the comments that have been submitted with the FCC, the vast majority of them are against this. There's only a few.
But why can't we make these comments to the telecom companies we use? Why shouldn't we be complaining to the board of directors and the management of the telecom companies that are in our service
Well,
area?
I mean, you know what would be really great? An intelligent thing to do is to actually talk to the shareholders, because these shareholders, they're going to be in the same digital cage.
Right.
I don't think they realize. So I'd be happy to actually put together a list and compile maybe.
That would be great. It would be great to have a list. It would be great to have a list. And Carolyn, you and I should think about, how do we write to the boards of directors? How do we find let's show people how to find the big shareholders and how to communicate with them.
I'll make that my goal for this week, because I don't have enough.
Okay.
I was going to say, given what Renette said there, just a little phrase, bring your cash, leave your phone. Mm-hmm. And but I would say also something that you just have to do is on February 1st, the TSA is going to start fining people if they don't bring a real ID or other acceptable ID to the airport. Now, people need to be prepared for this. I think, the airport has become a battleground, and do not think you're going on a lovely little trip, but in the process of lovely little trip, you're going to have to pass through the battleground, and you need to be prepared for that battleground. And one of the things that I would do is make sure that you know how you can get onto the plane, or what you're going to do, or how early you have to be there according to what you're going to do. And so if you have a passport or passport card, that's the best thing to take if you just want to go, through easily. Although I have had some people say that they look sort of like extra long at the passport cards because they really want a real ID. But just go to the TSA website. If you're planning to pay the fine, which is $45, they have now set up a form at TSA where you can pay in advance. I believe there will also be places at the airport where you can pay in advance as well. There's now what they're calling a TSA check-in. I'm interested to see what that means, because it says, you can pay at the TSA check-in before you get to the checkpoint. Really? We've never had a TSA check-in before, so not exactly sure what that is. But be prepared for how you're going to travel, what you're going to do, the fact that you aren't going to stand in front of that camera. But if you come without a real ID or a passport card or one of the other 15 identification cards that are allowed, you will be forced either not to fly, or you will have to pay the $45 plus go through a biometric screening. So they're going to take a digital photo of you, and a biographical screening. So I don't know what they're going to do. It could be that they're going to ask you questions, and you're going to have to give answers, and it'll be of things long past in your history, like, what was the color of your first car. I think, we have yet to see what's going to happen on February 1st, but be prepared. Make a decision as to what you're going to do. And some of you might want to even try out the $45 system. Come early enough, come come 3 hours in advance, try out the system. Pay the $45 in advance and see whether you can get through easily, because they tell you what to do with your receipt if you pay the $45 in advance. And then come and share the stories with our organization at refuserealid.org. At the very bottom, it says share your story. I'd like to hear what's happening at the airport all over the country. So be prepared when you go, be prepared to share the stories and then tell us so we can keep apprised all around the country what's going on.
Yeah, Twyla, can you also tell us about your efforts to try to define what states will allow you to change your ID back to a state ID and identify so that people know? Because there are states that probably don't even have laws that support what they're actually doing. As you said, the rogue DMVs. Maryland is one of them.
Right.
I understand that. But can you explain what you're doing in that direction?
Yeah, so the Department of Homeland Security lists 5 states that don't give you a choice between a real ID and a state driver's license. Those are all Republican-led states: Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Texas, and Wyoming. However, we have been getting stories from around the country of people who have not been allowed to switch back to a state driver's license. So we are now looking at the websites of different DMVs, well, not DMVs, different transportation departments around the country. And so far we have found six additional ones that specifically say on their website that you don't have a choice. And those 6 are, I've got a little list here, Colorado, Connecticut, Indiana, Maryland, Nebraska, and Utah. However, we don't know if they have laws that allow the DMVs or the Department of Transportation to say that, or has the Department of Transportation just decided on their own that they are going to not provide you with the option of a state driver's license, even though there might not be a law. So we are looking into that, and we would really like people who are listening who go and make the switch to come to refuserealid.org. Register the switch on that website at the bottom where there's the map in red. And if you tried to make the switch and it didn't work, tell us. There's also that option. We're probably going to put up another map that just shows that, because the interesting thing about this is what we have found in looking at the background data on those who have said, I tried to make a switch, but I couldn't, that some people in those states can make a switch, but other people apparently cannot, which would say that there aren't such laws. So I do really encourage people to engage with us and help us, because we are trying to work with state legislators and are working with 10 states now on legislation to extract themselves from the Real ID, to make it difficult for the Real ID to be imposed in the state, to give you a choice between a biometric photo or not. So a bunch of sort of poison pills that we could insert into the law to stop moving towards a digital ID and to get out of the Real ID system.
Twyla, there have been reports that Real ID is not accepted by ICE as proof that you are here legally. I don't understand what's been happening. Are you familiar with the controversy?
Yeah, so there was an article about there's a lawsuit, and it's against a citizen, or maybe it's a citizen against the Department of Homeland Security, because he was detained. He showed them his Real ID. They said, no, we don't accept that. And so now what we have are court documents from the Department of Homeland Security, and it's reported really well in Reason magazine. Anyway, so that what they're saying is that because of the differences that are happening in how the states do the Real ID, they no longer consider the Real ID as proof of citizenship. Now, we understand why this is, because the Homeland Security and law enforcement have found people with Real IDs, such as out of New York City, truckers who are getting Real IDs where it doesn't even have either a first or a last name for them. It's something like would not give or name not available or something like this on a Real ID issued by New York. So this is probably why they say that, but that just shows you that Real ID is sort of moot. This is a big campaign that the public is being sold for the idea that it's going to keep us secure and keep illegals out. And even the Department of Homeland Security says it's not a proof of citizenship.
I want to add one thing that's really important is that on the federal level, they want to get rid of this patchwork of the states, essentially.
Of
they
course.
want, a standardization of everything. And it's absolutely imperative that we ensure there's a patchwork because that is the monkey wrench. Once it's all standardized, then it's your toast. So our objective is to ensure that we have some states that are sitting in there and just putting a stick in the wheel and the spokes and just keeping the patchwork, because once that patchwork is gone, then it's all standardized. We're all down that cattle chute and they're golden. So we've got to ensure that the states really keep making that stand. And if it's only just 1, 2, or 3 states, or even like with the DHS now, this is all in our favor. This is fantastic. So there's some hopeful signs, actually.
I would say it's the same sort of thing that happened with COVID, right? So COVID, there were 19% of the population that didn't take the shot, but there's about 25% of the population that didn't buy the thing. And if you look at that thing, what's that thing by that guy in Belgium, mass formation. If you look at mass formation, you have to have the 25 to be able to stop the 25 that are totally bought, sold in it. And then gradually people come over to the people who have not bought the narrative. So the patchwork is essential because that is America. America is a patchwork. And the whole idea that the federal government wants to take away our states' rights, the states gave the federal government its right to even exist. But now the federal government wants to say to the states, you don't get to exist or do what you want. We, the federal government, will control you all and take away the patchwork. That's just getting rid of America. I mean, that's really kind of what that is.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to mention, because I dealt with this a lot when I was in government, the people who are pressing the hardest for this kind of standardization are large financial interests. If you are a big company or you are a big investor, if you can do it everywhere in all 50 states, it's going to make life much simpler for your operation. And I bring this back to what the president said about why he didn't want to disclose the Epstein files. He said it would hurt a lot of his friends, right? So we've really got oppressed by both large corporations and large investors, and I hate to say it, oligarchs. Oligarchs want standardization so they can do the same thing in all 50 states. But what we know is if you look at optimizing the total economy, nothing is worse. Because in fact, America is a very big place and it is a patchwork. Places are different, they have unique characteristics, and they have reasons why they're different. And those reasons are very healthy for the economy.
Well, they are very healthy. And as you said, every state is different. And this is a highly diverse country, not just the citizens themselves, but the geography and so on. But I think it's really important that we really speak specifically to the MAHA folks out there, because right now there is an official MAHA strategy, and there's this really weird split. It's almost like a split personality. So what they have is this framework, which ironically has a clash between deregulatory wireless goals and public health. Advocating. And it's like, well, wait a second, you can't have wireless saturation everywhere and improve public health. So this is actually an Achilles heel to the whole entire framework at the federal level. So what's really, really important is the MAHA people have to understand this. As much as we've been fighting against mandatory vaccines are nothing compared to massive, massive radio frequency saturation everywhere. So for the MAHA folks who are ignoring this, thinking it's no big deal, we need you guys to rise up one more time and actually attack this strategy that has a bifurcation of like what public health is and what it isn't. So we got deregulation over here, but at public health over here, we want to expand it and improve it, but they're clashing. They're like literally clashing within the same strategy. So this has to be pointed out, and we have to raise the standard and say, hello, if you want public health, you can't radiate the public.
And I would say it's really important to define what public health is here, because it is public health who was all about the takeover of the country during COVID. So, when you mention public health, my sort of radar comes up, but MAHA has a different idea of public health and they have to stay true to that. But that public health does not and should not contain any kind of surveillance of the American public. It should put the doctor and the patient back together in a trusted relationship, at an affordable price so that people can go in when they have to go in. There's things like that I don't think that MAHA is even working at, but would really bring, more time with the doctor, more time to have discussions that mean they don't have to just get a pill when they come into the exam room because the doctor's only got 5 minutes, doesn't even have time to look at them. Right. And I don't think MAHA is really working on that.
Well, I think you guys probably know about the doctors who are suing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for essentially forcing them to actually have conversations with their patients and talk with them, and they're not happy about what's going on around all the vaccines and the mandates being reduced, childhood schedule. And so the doctors are essentially like, hey, you're hurting our pocket, and we're not going to make as much money because we now have to talk to our patients and explain things to them, which is just.
But that's not the real core. If the doctors aren't making money by spending more time with the patients, it's because of the corporations. Remember, 80% of them are employees, and they have production. So people don't understand that. They have production quotas, a number of people they have to get through, and they'll get a certain amount of money. So this whole system is what has to be turned on its head to go back to what it's supposed to be. And then they will make sufficient money and they will have sufficient time. But right now they're complaining because they're still on a production schedule.
Right. But the thing that's going to shift it, I have to come back to boycotts and your money. I'm seeing an unprecedented number of people leave the corporate healthcare system and find the independent practitioners or doctors leaving too. And, where the consumer goes, if the consumer goes for local fresh food, if the consumer goes for independent practitioners, that's what's going to grow. And that's why it's so important that we each go sit down and go through all the money you're spending, all the money you're investing, where you're banking and who you're doing business with, and start to look at how you can shift your money. If 10% of the people in America stop banking with the banks who engineered the financial crisis, $29 trillion in bailouts, if we just left those banks, there would be, that's a financial rebellion.
Well, and the other thing is, to some extent, you're going to need to be willing to pay out of pocket for things. And people want everything to be covered by health insurance because the health insurance rates are so high. But, I understand there may be some people who are so poor that they can only do Medicaid, but there are a lot of us that do have the choice and maybe go out to expensive restaurants less and be willing to pay cash for a healthcare provider.
Well, this just brings up our plan here, which is called the 3C solution: cash, catastrophic coverage, and charity. And this is how the healthcare system used to work, and it was real health insurance. And the Affordable Care Act took away real health insurance and gave us all a mandate to have a qualified health plan, which is prepaid capitation coverage. And so it's just like the corporate version of socialized medicine. So we have to get back to that. That's one of the reasons that we built The Wedge at jointhewedge.com, is to help patients find doctors who are cash only. And they don't take insurance. They don't take Medicare. You are their client. You are the reason why they exist. The patient is the point. But we have to get that back with hospitals as well. So part of our goal in the 3C solution is cash-based hospitals as well. So we're really going to start driving this goal of the 3C solution next year. But just know that, Carolyn, you are so right. People have to be willing to pay cash, but they actually have to have real insurance back too. So that's why we have a bill called Make Health Insurance Real Again, and we're trying to get that introduced in Congress.
So you go ahead. You go ahead.
My partner has her health plan was, I think Blue Shield was like almost $1,400 a month, which is insane. Right? Insane. So she actually went with a health co-op, dropped it down to $300 a month, and now she takes that extra $1,000 to take good care of herself.
Right.
So
Right.
all of our money is going into an insurance rather than going into actually improving our health. And so she was very proactive, and it has changed. It has radically changed her life. And I really encourage people to start looking around. There's religious type of health insurance programs. There's this type of co-op that she's doing. Happy to get the name for all of you for the next show. But nonetheless, she took her power back. She took her health back. And she's like,
Right.
I'm going to pay $300 a month, and I'm going to take that thousand, and every single month, I'm going to put it towards my health. And it has changed everything.
We're doing a comparison chart of the top 6 of those healthcare sharing organizations. We're in the midst of it. And so probably the next time that we're together, it'll probably be online, and I'll mention it.
Oh,
Well,
that
and
would be
stay-
wonderful because I was in one of them for 10 years. It was great.
But
Yeah.
also, the bottom line, it may be cheaper to come out of pocket for many things because you're not, the co-payments for things you don't need and that are hurting you are expensive, So the bottom line is you may actually be saving money by taking back your power.
I do want
I just talked to a physician, story. Talked to a physician yesterday, and he told me that he and his wife were talking together whether insurance is really, makes any sense at all to have insurance. And last year, a child of his tore the ACL, and so they just paid cash for the surgery because to do the surgery didn't even meet their deductible for their so-called insurance.
Well, here in California, if you're on Medi-Cal, excuse me, you are required by law, state law, to use it. So you cannot go to a hospital, to a clinic and say, I just want to pay cash for this. I found this out several times from other friends. They're like, no. If you are on Medi-Cal, you have to use Medi-Cal. You cannot pay out of pocket, period. And I believe that's just simply, they want the metadata, right? They want all the information about your health because that is valuable. So it's here, California law, you have to use it. And if you don't, they said, if we find out that you paid cash, you will lose Medi-Cal.
Wow.
Okay, guys, we are out of time, I'm afraid. One piece of advice I have on the back of Renette earlier talking about leave your phones at home. Buy yourself a wristwatch, everybody, because the last time I left my phone at home, I couldn't. My car's so old, it didn't tell me what time it was. I had a meeting, and there's no clocks like there used to be around. So buy yourself, do not buy an Apple Watch.
Can I just mention, if you come to Solari, we finally gave up, and we have a Faraday bag. So you can turn your phone off, you can put it in the Faraday bag, you can shut the Faraday bag, nobody can reach you, but then in an emergency, you can open it up and use your phone. So if you have to take your phone with you, put it in a Faraday bag, go to Solari.com, and you can get a great example of one that's what I use all the time. Yeah. Carolyn too.
Fantastic. Well, thank you
I
so much.
sent one to you, Polly.
Yeah, I've got one. Remember the little QR code that we don't like on there?
No, they don't do that anymore. They had promised me that they would take off the QR code. They didn't. We caught them, and so now no QR codes.
Okay, guys, everybody go and buy that. Thank you so much to Twyla, Renette, and follow Renette's Substack. And Twyla, where should they follow you? I know Real ID, but what else?
At cchfreedom.org, and they can sign up for our monthly newsletter, cchfreedom.org.
And Renette, your Substack?
Renette Senham's foghornexpress.substack.com.
Yeah, and she's just got an awesome new Substack. So go there. Absolutely read all of them, but read the last one. It's great.
Yeah, and subscribe to Solari, everybody. And we will be back next week to continue this discussion. So for now, pray big, stand firm, and never settle. And we'll see you next week. Okay, we're live. So tell everyone your name, please.
My name is Amalia.
And this is about you breaking your dad out of hospital.
Yes.
So I have a first question I have for you. Did your father take the COVID shot?
He did not. And he had COVID twice, and he's 82 now.
Why didn't he take it?
He and my mother, I believe, felt they already had COVID, so why would they take a shot for something they already had?
Fair enough. And so what made him go into hospital? Did he have a pulse meter on his
Yes,
finger?
he had a pulse oximeter on his finger, and this was June 2020 when everyone was really frightened about COVID.
And so it got to a certain level below.
88.
I'm telling this because this is the same story we're hearing over and over again. And then what happened when it was 88?
So my father's oxygen got to 88. My mother called 911 and rushed him to the hospital. And the very next day, I said, Mom, let's take him out of this hospital because I don't know how this local hospital in Thousand Oaks treats COVID, but I know what they're doing in Tarzana, and I knew that Dr. Yadigar was saving every life. So my mom had to sign an AMA against medical advice. The nurse looked in my mother in my eyes and said, this might not be covered by insurance. And we said, bye-bye. Brought my dad, who's obese, sedentary, AFib, with prostate cancer, 78-year-old. So a typical American obese. So those type of people, God forbid, are the type that should have died at the hospital if we believe the WHO and America and Fauci. So how did my dad live unvaccinated this whole time and almost died at that hospital? So I pull him out, take him to the correct hospital in Tarzana where they were saving every life. And at the 30-day follow-up, I went to my dad's appointment and I said, what's going on here? And he said, well, they're doing ventilators, which we learned pretty quickly you weren't supposed to do that from our friends in Italy. And he said, they were treating your father for pneumonia. This is not pneumonia, it's called cytokine storm. So he said, your father would have died based on how I know this disease. He said, I've never seen a virus do anything like this. And he said that your father got Actemra, which is also called tocilizumab. He got dexamethasone, an inexpensive steroid. And I said, why aren't other places using it? And he said, well, my CFO and my CEO said, treat patients how you would treat yourself. You would treat your family. And he said, this is a $1,000 shot. And your father got 2, some people need 3. And so fast forward a little bit, I had other things happen. I had a very good friend take Moderna. I don't know if it was shot 1 or shot 2. She lost her mind. She became psychotic. 2 other people I know also became psychotic from Moderna. I also have a friend, a police officer, Stephen Ordonia, who said, I'm going to kill myself. He didn't know what was going on. And the hospital finally whispered to him, it's the COVID shot. So that allowed him to save his own life because he thought, "Why? I'm going crazy. I keep going to the ER." He was convulsing. His heart was having problems. His breathing was having problems. His groin was having problems. His mind was having problems. He was suicidal. So once he had the answer, he was able to save his own life. And since then, I've become friendly with, and I made a show on Rumble. I call it Growth Factor. I put it on YouTube, and they take it down. When I told the story of my father, they took it down and gave me a strike. Why can't I tell that story that I just told you about my father to help save other lives, to know that maybe you should treat the cytokine storm and not the pneumonia, because it wasn't pneumonia. So
I want to know more about how you got your dad out of hospital, because it was 2021, right?
2020, June 2020.
Oh, okay. But still, they were very, very strict then. No one was really allowed in. So how did you get in? How did you get him out?
So this was, remember, we were shut down March 17, 2020. So this was June. So it was just a few months later. And I just said, we're taking my father out. Nurse hands my mom an AMA against medical advice piece of paper, and she signed it, and we got my dad out. So I think it's just either that was early on, maybe people didn't know to sign the AMA, I don't know. We got lucky. The nurse just handed my dad over, took him in a wheelchair, brought him to the correct hospital. And then fast forward a year later, that same hospital, my friend, who's a family practice doctor from Cuba, Dr. Abilio Ramos, got remdesivir, 5 or 6 doses. Now, he was a stage 3 kidney disease patient. It is well known that you do not give remdesivir to liver and kidney patients. So why did they give him 5 or 6 doses of remdesivir? And he died. And I had 2 other acquaintance friends also die, likely of remdesivir, at that same hospital. So I look at that hospital and I say, hey, my dad would have died there. He didn't die. And then 3 acquaintance friends died at that hospital from remdesivir. So I would say my story basically goes back to May 2019. I was at a seminar in Pasadena. Who was on stage? People I never heard of. Del Bigtree, never heard of him. Rashid Buttar. This is May 2019 in Pasadena, California. And they're up on stage. I thought they were a bunch of weirdos because I'm a Merck drug rep. I believe in vaccines and pills. I vaccinated all 4 of my children. I stopped at HPV, thank God, because I started thinking for just a moment. I think I better think about this. It didn't make sense. Rashid Buttar, Del Bigtree, Robert Scott Bell, the Quillins, the Bollingers, up on stage saying, and Dr. Bruce Lipton, vaccine passports are coming. You're not going to be able to get on planes and restaurants without a vaccine passport. I thought they're so weird. I'm a drug rep, or I used to be. I believed in these things, so I thought they were so strange. 9 months later, COVID comes out. 9 months later, Fauci saying 6 feet apart, mask yourself with a cotton blue stained or black stained, pink stained, unhealthy thing on your face, and then eventually inject yourself. So all of a sudden, those people up on stage made sense, and I started listening.
Okay, let's go back to you being a Merck drug rep. When did that come in?
So being a Merck drug rep, looking back, what I realized, this is my brainwashed self. My brainwashed self was Merck is an incredible company. This was in the late 90s, early 2000, where we would say to doctors, we bring ivermectin to third world countries for river blindness. So when Rachel Maddow was on CNN telling me it's horse paste, I said, no, I knew this 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. Ivermectin is what Merck brought to third world countries for river blindness. So I knew they weren't telling the truth. They were lying, trying to make us look stupid. And then I remember the FDA Twitter was, hey y'all, don't be silly, don't take horse paste, you're not a horse. And I'm thinking, what is going on here that they're saying these things that aren't true? Because I worked for Merck. They're the ones that brought ivermectin to the world and supposedly gave it away free. So being a drug rep, when I helped launch Vioxx, which is for rheumatoid arthritis, a few years later it got taken off the market for heart attack and stroke. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, it does.
And guess what I was thinking as a drug rep? Oh, people have heart attack and stroke all the time. It's the lawyers that are doing this for the money. That's the way I used to think. So I wasn't listening. I would hear people say, my child got autism from the pneumococcal shot, from the MMR shot, and I wasn't listening to them. And now, about a week later, my very good friend, I won't say too much, but let's just say a lone COVID specialist tried to scare me, twice sending me this news story that there's an outbreak of measles in Florida. And my red flag goes on, oh, they're picking on Florida because measles outbreak happens all the time. So I reached out to my friend Larry Cook, who's a vaccine expert. I said, what's going on here? He sends me the FDA insert, which any of us can find. And I find in section 5.6 of the MMR shot that children should stay away from immunocompromised people when they've taken the MMR because it's coming out of their nose and throat. So for me, now that I'm educated in vaccines, I say, oh, that's called shedding. That means most likely, using logic, that these outbreaks around the country and the world of MMR that children are getting at elementary schools, probably because a kid just got the MMR shot. Because if I'm going to believe in the FDA and the product insert, it clearly says in section 5.6 that children are shedding through the nose and throat for 6 weeks, which I'm sure it's probably longer. So I'm a bit awake because now I read.
Okay, I want to go back to the drug rep thing. Here's why. What do? You take a drug and you go and sell it to someone, a doctor or something.
So what we did was we gave samples. So I can't really say I was selling drugs. What I could say is I would visit the doctor's office. I would have to get back past the front desk. And then I would do big programs, like when the Getty Museum in Los Angeles was new, I did a big program with 2 big chartered buses.
So you got massive allowance to do this?
Yeah, I would get an allowance to do a lunch, do a dinner, pay the doctors to speak about this new drug because they were also educating other doctors. But what I noticed is they were never reading the studies. I was telling them what the results were. So they would either read the summary, not read it at all, but no one was really looking at the data.
So I just want to say this again. So you get this kind of money and you make a big event, and then you pay the doctors to come and you say educate, I say sell the drugs to a load of doctors who I presume have got a nice meal in front of them, something to make them be even there. Right. Okay. So that's done. How's the deal done?
So really all it is, I would say to the doctor, this new drug is coming out, let's say Vioxx, Maxalt. I had cholesterol and blood pressure medications, all kinds of new medications Merck was bringing out. And I would notice too, by the way, that then Pfizer would then say, well, we want to get on it, AstraZeneca. For example, in the cholesterol realm, Merck was one of the first to bring cholesterol drugs to the market. And then they made billions. So then Pfizer made billions from Lipitor, and then AstraZeneca made Crestor. So that whole thing too. Now, when I listen to doctors who know the science and review this, because they themselves were about to be on a statin, the cholesterol-lowering drug, they say, oh, wow, the studies show that actually people who live longest are people with high cholesterol, that cholesterol is protective, and don't blame red meat and cholesterol for what sugar and alcohol did. So to answer your question, I would hire a doctor, hey, do you want to talk at the Magic Castle, at the Getty Museum, or lunch? And then I would pay them, I think it was either $250 or $750, I don't remember what I paid. And then Merck would also pay for whatever, the meal, the bus, whatever I had to do.
But my interest is in then so say I go into a doctor and I say, I don't know, I have anxiety or I have whatever, need statins, and they go, you need statins because I feel like it's trading. It's basically people are getting paid money off everywhere. So I'm a doctor at your conference. I want to buy your statins or whatever. So how does that transaction work? I order it in to Merck?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, there's 2 things going on. One is I would also go to HMO meetings health maintenance organization, and usually it's a big group of people coming up with their own insurance, so you and I can buy into it. We're getting insurance like Kaiser, for example. So I'd go to these meetings and I would talk about medications, which I thought were the best because they're the newest and greatest. They would always pick the least expensive. So when you're in these HMOs, typically you're not getting the best device or the best pill or shot. You're getting what's cheapest. But the interaction really, I didn't have anything to do with it. I would just talk to you as a doctor. I would give you samples. You would write a prescription, and it would go through the pharmacy. So I really didn't have any.
Did you get a commission as a rep?
You're supposed to get. I was supposed to get about $10,000. I rarely would. You're supposed to, but they just somehow I never met my quota.
Down on next, so the whole thing is a joke.
Yeah, and I wasn't making a lot of money back then in the late.
I'm not accusing you. I'm just trying to find.
Oh, say whatever you want. Oh, I'm open.
No, I'm just trying to work it out for.
Say whatever you want. But I'll let you know. People thought I was making so much money. I was probably making between, depending on if I got a bonus, 38 to 42,000. Let's say around the year 2000. People thought when you're in products like during surgical products, you could make a lot more. In devices, I was just a pill pusher, let's say. So I wasn't making a ton of money. People thought I was, but I wasn't.
Thank you for your honesty on all of that, because it's important we understand how it all works behind the scenes. Well done for breaking your dad out, and thanks for reporting on all the injuries you're seeing as well. Anything else you want to say?
Yes, there's one more thing I want to say. As my friend Steven was talking about suicide, because he didn't realize what was going on, I wrote an article. So I also have a Substack called Growth Factor. It's a blog. And I started to look up, which a very simple internet search for mRNA psychosis and suicide. And yeah. And so basically, people should be aware that most likely a contraindication of these COVID shots is suicide.
Wow, thank you.
Hopefully I made sense.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.